Well, welcome to Good Business Pays Television, where, as you know, we interview leaders from around the country who are involved in the world of payments and business. And today we are lucky to have with us Martin McTague, who's the National Chair of the Federation of Small Businesses. Martin, welcome to you today.
Hi, Terry.
So first question, I think, really is, I looked on your LinkedIn and I saw that you had a sort of engineering background. And I thought, well, with somebody with an engineering mind and talking about payments, why is it so difficult for people to pay on time or promptly?
I think it's a lot to do with motivation. For quite a lot of businesses, they have decided for tactical reasons that they don't intend to pay on time. They want to stretch their supply chain to the absolute limit because that's part of their business plan. So I don't think in that case it's anything to do with efficiency. It's more culture. However, there are a big chunk of businesses who are just frankly inefficient, useless processing payments. And in that case, they don't see it as a high enough priority to invest in getting that technology right. So it's not like we're talking about rocket science here. This isn't difficult to do. In fact, it's got easier over the years. It's just that they're not motivated to do anything about it.
And you've run small businesses. I think you still run small businesses as well as
big
job. Have you felt the pain of slow and late payment in your business career?
Oh yeah. It's been a consistent part. I mean, I've been in business now for 35 years, and it's always been a consistent part of my business life. And you know what? It's a feature of being small business. You sort of assume, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, and then you realize gradually that just about everybody has some kind of problem. I think at one point or another, something like 85 to 90% of all SMEs have had payment problems, and I think currently in our surveys, it's over 50% are still having payment problems, even with the fact that technology now makes it really very easy to pay people, but they're still experiencing problems.
So is it
a perpetual problem?
Where does it rank? Where does it rank on sort of the top issues for your members for small business in terms of payment problems? Is it still one of the top problems?
It is the top problem. I don't. I I say to people, I'm in danger of boring myself and other people how many times I repeat it, but I feel so strongly about it that it is something that can be fixed. It's something that there are no technological boundaries to stop. It's a question of having the right culture and the right motivation, and really people realizing that they have a responsibility to make this happen.
And you've also worked with big businesses a lot, I know. And how do you change culture like that? How do you change behavior, do you think?
Well, I'm starting to realize, maybe a bit late in the day, that the way to affect them is to actually not talk to the people processing the payments or even the senior management, but talk to their investors. Because I firmly believe that people who've got a poor payment culture are generally going to put their supply chain under pressure. And then the best suppliers will leave them. And ultimately, it destroys value. So, if I'm a shareholder in a business that routinely abuses its supply chain, I think, this is a danger signal. We saw a few years ago, didn't we, with the Carillion crisis, that lots of investors started to realize that Carillion was stretching their payment terms, and many of them walked away, and that's what put Carillion under pressure, because they started, there were alarm bells ringing all over the city about, well, these guys seem to be in trouble. And I think it's true of lots of businesses. If they feel that the only lever they've got to pull to try and improve their balance sheet is to squeeze their suppliers, well, then that really, for me, shows that there's something fundamentally wrong with their businesses.
And it's a sort of invisible problem as well, in a way, I think, isn't it? I've just been speaking to the Business Travel Association, and so their members are small travel management companies who have to buy, let's say, airline tickets on behalf of larger companies. They have to pay the airline today, but they're forced to sign contracts that mean they get paid in 60 or 90 days. And
Yeah.
that's a huge amount of time for small companies to have to wait for money to come through the door, but they daren't complain about it in case they lose their customer.
And I think a lot of big businesses rely on that sort of asymmetry of power that they've got, that they can bully their suppliers into accepting very poor payment terms. And once you're into a relationship that is essentially abusive, it's very difficult to break out of it, because you maybe become dependent on that business. And once you've got over the initial hump of being paid slowly, you just settle into a routine of being paid slowly. But I think it's wrong. It's both morally wrong, and I think ultimately it's economically wrong. It's damaging for the UK economy. And there might have been an excuse once for having 30 days to process paper invoices that were posted into you, and you had a team of people shuffling through piles of paper and raising checks and posting them to you. Really, in this day and age, that we're still talking about 30 days as if that was acceptable? You can process a payment within a few days. You can pay within a few minutes. There is no excuse for this.
And do you see the situation getting worse or better, or is it always the same?
Well, I could see that if you've got a sort of small business relationship, I think generally where the power is even, then I think that is improving. So when I talk to small business owners, they say they can put pressure on other small businesses to pay on time, and generally they're processed reasonably quickly. The problem is that how do you put pressure on the big guys? How do you get them to pay on time when they've clearly decided they don't want to?
Are there some sectors that are worse than others, or is it across the board?
It's pretty widespread, but there are a couple of sectors that stand out, that have stood out for many years as being very poor payment practices. Probably the worst one is construction. I've just mentioned Carillion. But the practices that have emerged in construction about QSs, processing payment, or checking the quality of the work, raising objections, having to issue payment certificates before you can even issue an invoice. This whole process has just meant that the payments in the construction industry are really poor. And then they even have a fairly unique system of retentions as well, where they'll retain people's money for sometimes several years before they get paid.
And that seems to be spreading to the retail sector. I see with Etsy retaining 75% of people's money for whatever reason, and they're all
I know. And I mean, I see examples where I think it's, if you take somebody like Amazon, who are very big processor of small business transactions, because obviously they're a massive marketplace, they're poor players. They've consistently been poor players. So if you get into a situation of dominance where you don't feel any pressure to perform, and then you start to pay poorly, that's I think that's something that only government can respond to.
So you mentioned government, and we've talked about the commercial sector, and obviously those companies exist to make money. That's fine. What about the public sector, though? What small businesses working for public sector organisations? Is there a problem there, or is it all sunshine in terms of fast payment there for them?
No, it's still a problem there, and I think in a perverse way, local governments have, because they're under pressure. They're struggling to meet their obligations because government has reduced the amount of money that are available to local government. They're coming up with all sorts of wheezes for avoiding paying people on time, using essentially supply chain finance arrangements, which it's galling because it's essentially telling you that you're going to have to pay for somebody else's poor payment practices. But, that has increasingly crept into local government. And I think it should be very clear that all local government should meet the requirements of the prompt payment code. In fact, should be applied. Why they shouldn't. There clearly is a public interest in them setting an example to other larger organizations.
Yeah. And we've got hopefully some new regulations or reviews of regulations coming out later this year. We hope one in the commercial sector, which the Small Business Commissioner has been involved with, and I know you have too, around drawing up or a sort of review of the current payment regulations in the commercial sector. We've also got the public sector procurement bill working its way through. Yeah. What does the Federation hope to see in these new bills?
I mean, there are several things I think the government could definitely do. One area would be to make it very clear within a big organization who is responsible for payment practices and monitoring them. At the moment, senior management in big companies duck and dive whenever this question's asked. There's always finger pointing at somebody else. And I think the buck needs to stop with somebody. And our suggestion is it should be the audit committee. The chair of the audit committee should have a legal responsibility to report on this, ideally in the annual report so that anybody can see it. And I would suggest people who should be interested in that are the investors, because if I was seeing poor payment practices, I would be worried about the resilience of that business. So I think there's a legitimate reason why it should be published in the annual report. There should be somebody that we can hold account for it. I also think the Small Business Commissioner shouldn't be in a position where they can only act on complaints where somebody, makes a formal complaint to them above the line so that they have to publish the complainant. I think it must be possible for the Small Business Commissioner to look at the ability to investigate what are essentially whistleblower reports, so that you don't have to be somebody that's prepared to stand up and complain about a business. But if the Small Business Commission is consistently seeing reports about poor behavior, they should be able to investigate it.
Yes, and I think the other thing is that Good Business Pays, I describe it as we pull the black box out of the sea when a plane's crashed to see, for companies that have gone bust, what their payment terms and contracts were in the few years before they went bust. We find whether it's the retailers that have gone bust, like Wallace and Debenhams and all those names that were on the high street, and Flybe, Midas Construction, Tufnell's Parcel Express, doesn't matter who it is, they were all bad payers, slow payers, late payers, and it got worse in the last 6-8 months before they crashed into the sea.
Absolutely.
Now, wouldn't it be nice that small businesses, or in fact any business, could get a real-time picture of what payment practices is an organization, so they can take their own decisions about whether they want to work with that company or not.
I couldn't agree more, Terry. And I know your organization does a fantastic job in that respect. But, I think sometimes we get stars in our eyes, don't we, as small business owners? We see some blue chip come dangling an order, and we're sort of blinded by their glamour, and we accept the deal. Often they sweetheart us in the early stages by treating us well, and then they'll impose new contract terms without any reference to you completely. There is even situations where you've been asked to bid to stay on a supplier arrangement, so they're essentially extracting money from you to avoid losing their business. And this kind of thing happens too frequently, and if you knew that you were going to be treated like that abusive behavior, you wouldn't enter into a relationship with them. But I think too often you see a big name, a big brand, and you think, oh, how this will be good for me and good for my business.
And it's difficult to resist when that carrot is dangled in front of you as a small business. So what advice? Yeah, what advice would you have for let's say I'm a small business person and the big business says, well, you can work for us. What are the things I need to look out for, apart from obviously feeling happy about the fact that the contract is heading my way? What are the danger signs and banana skins I need to look out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think good advice would be to do your homework, look at what publicly available information there is about their payment practices, and I think Good Business Pays is a great source of information. But you must not be dazzled by a big brand. You must treat them with a certain amount of skepticism, and be careful about adopting any kind of contract they're prepared to put in front of you. I think it's, what do they say? It's sort of accept in haste and repent at leisure. You will find that you spend a lot of time trying to unpick that contract once you've won it.
Mm-hmm. So the Federation of Small Businesses was the first organization, the first business organization to support Good Business Pays when we started 3 years ago. So thank you for that support that you've always given us. And you've also been, and your colleagues have been, flying the flag around payment and late payment and slow payment for many years now, and achieved a lot. So what role do you see for an organization like Good Business Pays, when lots of other people have been flying that flag for quite a long time? And how do you think we should work together in the future over the next few years to try and tackle this problem?
Well, I think we're completely on the same page when it comes to, trying to change this culture. I think we've got a joint interest. You're a really effective campaigning group. We have got a lot of contacts within government that give us a lot of leverage when it comes to big political processes. And I think the combination is irresistible, really. Ultimately, I am confident that we will change this. We will persuade government and we will persuade big business that there is a mutual interest in squeezing this kind of behavior out of corporate culture in the UK. Ultimately, I really believe it's in everybody's interest that we do that.
Well, Martin McTague, thank you for such a wide-ranging interview and for being so open and frank with us today. I look forward to continuing to work with you and the Federation to solve this problem. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Terry.